Bella, you're too much. Hello everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my sunroom. It has been so long since I've filmed in here, and we finally are getting like springish weather, which is unusual for us. It is warm in here today, so I thought, let's film in here, because it's great. And we have a little visitor today. Hey Baba, what are you doing? So she's just gonna hang out around me. Welcome to my February wrap-up. I am excited to go through the books today, and it's gonna be probably a little bit quicker one. I say that and I know I ramble, but I did feature a few of these books that I'm going to talk about in a reading vlog. So I'm not going to go into too much depth with those, but I do have a few that I do want to talk about today. So in February, I read 10 books, which is the exact same amount that I read in January. And I kind of took my time with reading this month, which was really lovely, except for the first 2 weeks at least, because that was when I did my reading out of my comfort zone, reading sci-fi for 2 weeks. I did read a lot of books in those 2 weeks, but I digress. So this month, I read one YA fantasy, I read one regular fantasy, one adult fantasy, and I read 6 sci-fi books. I read one middle grade and one nonfiction. The middle grade was also sci-fi, so like technically I read 7 sci-fi books this month, which is insanity to me. That's so much sci-fi in 1 month, but that is because of my video that I did. I also had a wide variety of ratings this month. I didn't have a 5-star rating until the very last book of the month that I read, and that one just deserves all the things. But so I had 1 2.5 star, I had 1 3-star, I had 2 3.5 stars, I had 2 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 1 5-star, and 1 that I'm not giving a rating to, which we'll get to when we get to it. But yeah, okay, so this month I started off really strong. I read a bunch of sci-fi books for a video. If you guys haven't seen it, I will leave it linked down below. It is, well, I'll leave both of them linked down below because it is 2 parts. It was reading out of my comfort zone for 2 weeks. I did like a giant reading vlog where I just read sci-fi for 2 weeks, a variety of sci-fis, including these 4 or 5 books that I have physically, and then 1 book that was like audiobook form. So I started with that one. I read Binti by Nyadi Okorafor, which is a novella, a sci-fi novella. I ended up giving that one 3 stars. That one I listened to on audiobook. The audiobook was pretty great, and it was so strong for the first like 75% of the book, and then the ending just totally ruined it for me. Then I read Bonds of Brass by Scretzky. This is a YA sci-fi situation with like gay romance, friends to lovers romance. It's great, and I do recognize that there is a racial issue around this because it is written by a white woman, but the main character is a person of color. So I believe actually she might be changing her ways with her second book that's being released in September. I think that she might be writing it from the love interest point of view, who is white. So I will keep you updated with that. But this one I loved a lot. This one I gave 4 stars. It is a new like guilty pleasure read of mine because I just became so attached to these characters and their situation that I loved it so much. Then I ended up reading Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and if you guys have seen my video, you'll know that I got really angry with this book because it is missing a key piece of information that made me so physically mad and so confused that I was like this close to DNFing it halfway through. I didn't say that in my video, but I'm saying it here. But I'm glad that I stuck it out because it was fun and enjoyable and whatever. But I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Now, all of you Red Rising stands out there, explain to me why you like Darrow so much, because he's kind of the worst. I hate him so much. I don't understand why you guys like him. He's kind of the worst. For the majority of the book, he's like completely forgets about where he comes from and just like completely dedicates himself to this game of that these golds play, which kind of just feels like an entirely detached narrative from where we started from. Go watch this video if you want more information on how I feel about this book. But it does feel like a adult Hunger Games, and it is not super sci-fi. Like, the only sci-fi element to this is that it's set on Mars. That's it. Like, there's no like crazy technology or anything. It's just set on Mars. Like, it could easily be set in our world kind of like The Hunger Games is. It's very dystopian. There is that. Then next I read a really disappointing middle grade, and that is The Dragon Pearl by Yoon-ha Lee. This one had so much promise as well, and just didn't hit the mark on like a ton of stuff. The characters were flat, and I didn't understand their motivations. We didn't even have really a character arc with our main character. The world was really cool, but done so poorly, and I don't know, but I gave it 2.5 stars. Really, it probably should be only 2 stars or even 1.5 stars. But I ran it through Compile, and it was a really low 3-star. So we're giving it 2.5. Yeah. It was really disappointing to me. I had high hopes in this one. It is the first Rick Riordan Presents book that I actually really don't like, and I wouldn't recommend. So, and then my reading turned around in that video, and I ended up reading The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and I absolutely adored this. This one got 4.5 stars. It was so good. Becky Chambers is a master at balancing the perfectly human nature in all of us with this expansive world that these beings live in. I love it so much, and I cannot wait to read her other books because she's just incredible at what she does. I loved this book so much. So much. And then last that I read for that video, I ended up reading The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. This one was kind of disappointing as well. It was still really enjoyable, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, but I just didn't care. I just didn't care about the story. I honestly, if I wasn't reading this for that video that I did, I probably wouldn't have finished it. I probably would have put it down and forgotten about it for like a year or 2 years, or it would have taken me like weeks and weeks and weeks to finish because I just didn't care about the story. The characters were so fun though, so it was really enjoyable to read. I just didn't care. Anyways, so those were all the books that I read for that reading out of my comfort zone sci-fi video. In between all of those sci-fi books, I ended up finishing a read that I had started in January, and that is Hall of Smoke by H.M. Long, and you guys have to pick this up. Please pick this up. It is so good. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. It is just so good. I love it so much, and I would die for Hessa, our main character. She's incredible. The world building is so good. You're dealing with gods of old and gods of new that are having this like war and tension-y stuff, and then this mortal girl who is getting caught in the middle of it while she's trying to regain the favor of her goddess who's kind of left her to the wayside after a complete massacre of her people, and she's the last one standing. Like, it is a lot, and I love it so much. And Hannah Long, actually, I follow her on Instagram. She follows me too, and we've had great conversations, and like she's recommended books to me and stuff, and she's Canadian, which is just even better, and I love her so much, and I cannot wait to see what else she brings out in this world, because I know in 2022 we're getting another book in this world, and I'm so excited to get it. Oh, it's so good. But yes, this is also a fantasy standalone. You can read this on its own. You don't need to know anything else, and you don't need to read anything else of hers. But you should when it does come out, because it's awesome, and she does such a good job. Oh, but yes, this was so good, and I think I pretty much explained it. It is Vikings. It is Hessa, our main character, who fights with an axe, and she also has the ability to kill people with her screams. Like, she's basically like a banshee, but not actually called a banshee. She's got something called Yang's fire, and she can like mess with people with it. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it so much. Ah, so good. Oh, I love this book so much, and it is so beautiful. Like, look at this. Look how gorgeous. And we have our main character with an axe on the front. Please read this. And then after all those videos had ended and all that kind of stuff, I ended up picking up Vicious by Ve Schwab, because this has been on my TBR for way too long. And I finally told myself, I was like, okay, I'm in between videos right now. I need to read this because it's been hanging around for way too long. I need to finish this. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was good. It didn't really have a lot going on. Like, it wasn't like a super intense action-packed plot, but it did have a good balance of like character stuff going on, because it was an examination of like morals and what makes people a hero or a villain. So we're dealing with basically like someone who believes themselves to be a villain and acts like a villain but actually ends up being like almost the hero of the story, and then someone who believes themselves very strongly to be the hero is the villain. Like, it's just a lot going on, and it's great. So it's also kind of dark academia a little bit, because we deal with a timeline where Victor and Eli, these two best friends, are at school, and then we deal with the timeline of like the present day when Victor is trying to get back at Eli for basically destroying his life. So it's a good time, and if you haven't read it, I would definitely suggest you pick it up, especially if you like morally gray characters and like superhero movies, but you want like the villain story instead of the super story. It's one of those things, and it was really enjoyable. All right, so the next book that I read in the month of February, I ended up picking up because my friend and her sister, actually two of my friends, they are sisters, gave this book to me for Christmas. And my one friend, she is a geneticist, so she is trying to get her second master's in genetic counseling right now, and she deals with science stuff, and she reads all sorts of nonfiction books about it, and like, you know, that kind of a thing. And she came across this book and she read it, and then she gave it to her sister to read, who absolutely loved it as well. And both of them said that it reads so much like fiction, like it is such an easy read to get to. I wasn't planning on reading it this month, I was planning on reading it in March, but the audiobook came up on Libby, and I was like, you know what, why not? Let's give it a chance. Because it is nonfiction, I wanted to listen to it on audiobook as well as read it, and that is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. So this is the story of the Black woman named Henrietta Lacks, who, when she was dying from cervical cancer, got some of her cells removed without her knowing, and they became the world's most coveted immortal cell that basically launched an entire generation and an incredible amount of research and knowledge and cures for diseases. And it is such an important gene, and it's called the HeLa gene, or the HeLa cell. Sorry, not a gene, it's a cell. Her cells are still living today. They're still being researched and used in all these studies and stuff like that. But this is the story of that, and also Henrietta's family not knowing that her cells were taken from her, and not knowing all of this stuff that goes along with it. So this story is written by Rebecca Skloot, who is a white woman who came across the HeLa cell in her biology class in university and became obsessed with figuring out the story of Henrietta Lacks, because she was just a footnote in her class. Like, her professor said, like at the end of the lecture, said, oh, by the way, Henrietta Lacks was a Black woman, and left it at that. So she became obsessed with figuring out the story, and she reached out to the family, and she was a true journalist. Like, she did not leave them alone until they would talk to her, and spent 10 years researching this book and putting it together and becoming really good friends with the family. So it is also a story about Rebecca Skloot, and it is also a story about the Lacks' family. And I find it, like any book written by a white woman that covers the topic of a Black person's story or a person of color's story, I find it gently problematic. But I will say that Rebecca Skloot really went and did a fantastic job on this. And I even googled, there's no other books on Henrietta Lacks. This is kind of it for a biography style book. I'm sure there's science books out there that explain the HeLa cell and all that kind of stuff, but this is kind of it that you get with Henrietta Lacks' story. And it is an incredibly important story to know. So there is that. I wanted to point it out that it is a white woman writing this Black woman's and Black family's story and bringing it to life and stuff like that. But she kind of went about it like the wrong way at the beginning. She's a true journalist, right? You're gonna bug the family until they get you the information you want. But she became really close with the family, and she ended up setting up a foundation for Henrietta Lacks' descendants to basically fund scholarships for them to go to school, which I think is pretty cool, because it is something that she says in this book that she's going to do even before this book was published. And I believe she set it up even before the book was published. I always find it a little bit problematic when a white woman writes, or a white person of any gender, writes a story about a Black person, because it just feels wrong to me. So there is that. And there's also the issue that the Lacks family throughout this didn't see a penny from the HeLa cell research or anything, because this book also raises the scientific, ethic, and moral problem of, do you regain possession and ownership over your tissue when it's removed from you and given up for research? And that was a really interesting issue because it is still a thing that's debated today. Like, why wouldn't you want to give up your cells for research if they were helpful in any way? But then people are like, what if you want to monetize it, right? Like, especially with the HeLa gene, like, this is $1 billion industry with the HeLa gene, and the family saw nothing. They didn't see a penny from it. So it does bring that issue up, and I believe from the book's revenue, they didn't directly see any money, but I read on the website, because I went and researched, that a percentage of the revenue made by this book was directly donated to the Henrietta Lacks Foundation. So yeah. I don't even want to recommend this book because of those issues that I have with it. I do recommend you guys look up Henrietta Lacks and her story. I know it was also made into an HBO film starring Oprah Winfrey and Rose Byrne, but again, I don't think the family saw a single penny from their contribution and their story for it. So, yeah. That's kind of all I have to say about this book, but it was really interesting and well written and really well researched. It's a well done book, but I still find it hard to digest because it was written by a white woman. I'm gonna leave it there for that, but I did read that this month, and that is the one that I don't rate because I do not want to rate nonfiction. I find it weird rating nonfiction because it is something that is quote unquote true stories, even though all stories can be a little bit fictionalized, even biographies and autobiographies, because you tell the story you want to tell. But I find it hard rating them, so I don't. That's why that's a non-rating. But okay, last book that I read in the month of February is Pet by Ikweke Emezi. This book was so good. I listened to it on audio. The audiobook is just exceptional. And I was listening to it on an audiobook as I was doing my bullet journal on the last day of the month, and it was just so good. Oh, this book is heartbreaking and so beautiful at the same time. I love it so much. It's about monsters and believing that all monsters are gone in this world, but they're really not, and it's about the hunt down for monsters. And I will give you a trigger warning, it deals with child abuse from familial members. The most blatant abuse in this is physical, but it's very strongly hinted at that it was also sexual abuse, so I will warn you with that. But it is so beautiful. I absolutely adored this book. It is also an Own Voices novel, I believe. I'm not sure, but our main character, Jam, is a transgender girl living in this world. She's not deaf, but she signs to speak most of the time. She was mute for most of her childhood and then has issues speaking and doesn't really want to speak. But yeah, it's a beautifully written book, and everybody needs to read this. It's so beautiful, you guys. But yeah, this was the 5-star this month, and it quickly skyrocketed to having a place on my favorites of 2021 list, even though we're still in 2021 in the early months of it, but this is on that list as of right now. Anyways, my friends, that is it. That is all from me today. I really hope you enjoyed hanging out in my sunroom with me. I am pretty happy with my reading month. I do wish that I had read a few books that impressed me more. And I am looking forward to continuing my reading in March. I have a great TBR set up for it. I am going to be continuing the 2 classics that I have started this past month. I am currently reading Viet by Charlotte Bronte, as well as The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. And I am also going to hopefully be reading Persuasion at some time in this month, rereading it for Desi's Jane Austen book club. I also have a few books set up, like novel books that are set up, and I actually made a TikTok about it. So I will post that right here so you can see which books they are. It is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, Kings of the Wild, The Midnight Bargain, The Centaur's Wife, and oh, there was one more. But yeah, that you can see the TikTok. I think there's one more. I might be entirely wrong. Those might be the only fiction ones. But yeah, I'm looking forward to March and seeing where that takes me. Yes, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in another video soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.